Hey folks, Seth Liebson here. As we watch cities burn, statues being torn down, and calls to defund the police, if you haven't already, it may be time to think about personal protection. Guns Etc. has 10,200 square feet of guns, ammo, safes, and a staff that will work with you to find the best firearm for your situation. So stop by their huge store in Mesa or click on gunsetc.com and have access to over $400 million in firearms and accessories. And if you like my monologues, please subscribe to 960 The Patriots YouTube channel. Welcome back. Happy Tuesday, August 11th, 2020. I gathered this was bound to happen. The chief of police for the city of Seattle, Carmen Best, has resigned her position. It was avoidable. You've heard me say positive things about her here before, as I could tell from her statements throughout L'Affaire Seattle. She was not on board with the race game, and she was not on board with the surrender game. This, after the city council voted to cut the police budget, which would reduce the force there by nearly 10%. This, after the mayor earlier told the police to stand down as anarchists carve out an autonomous zone in Seattle. This, after the mayor said on national television that the autonomous zone could prove to be the summer of love. This, after Seattle saw a 525% increase in crime due to the stand-downs, including in the categories of narcotics, violent crime, rape, robbery, assault, and increased gang activity. This after the mayor allowed those anarchists to take over a police building in the autonomous zone, including the homicide of 2 black teens in the autonomous zone, 2 whose names will be known but to God and their families. This after nearly 160 years of knowing autonomous zones, or whatever you want to call them, are nothing less than nullifications of federal, state, and local public and private property. The state of Washington is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Democratic and Socialist parties. The governor is a Democrat, the mayor of Seattle is a Democrat, the 2 U.S. senators are Democrat, and of the 10 members of the House of Representatives from the state of Washington, 7 are Democrats. The state House and Senate are both Democratic Party majority. There are 9 members of the Seattle City Council. 8 are Democrats. The 9th is a socialist. 6 years ago, a retired policeman from Seattle wrote this. 6 years ago, quote, "There are some on the left who question whether America is turning into a police state. I would challenge instead, is America degenerating into an anti-police state?" Close quote. He wrote this right after Ferguson, Missouri, a story filled with lies and still filled with them. In fact, just last week, House Democrats and the Judiciary Committee showed protests across America, with the protesters chanting, "Hands up, don't shoot," a reference to what the deceased in Ferguson is reported to have said. Is reported. He never said it. It didn't happen. And fact check after fact check, including an Eric Holder Department of Justice investigation, concluded just that. In fact, from the report, Eric Holder's Justice Department investigation, quote, "All of these purported witnesses, upon being interviewed by law enforcement, acknowledged that they did not actually witness the shooting there, but rather repeated what others told them in the immediate aftermath of the shooting. Witness accounts suggesting that Brown was standing still with his hands raised in an unambiguous signal of surrender when he was shot are inconsistent with the physical evidence, are otherwise not credible because of internal inconsistencies, or are not credible because of inconsistencies with other credible evidence." Close quote. This, of course, did not stop speech after theatrical speech on the floor of the House of Representatives 6 years ago, where each Democratic member of the House closed their speech with the ersatz invented mantra out of Ferguson. Back to that cop from Seattle, Steve Pomper. He wrote, "If an officer gains nothing by taking an oath because the society he is swearing to protect and serve no longer values such a pledge, then perhaps the law enforcement oath's time has passed. If an officer who has chosen a profession in which he or she will risk his or her physical and mental health and perhaps even life cannot get the benefit of the community's doubt, then who else in society deserves this benefit? It seems more and more the criminal does. The vast majority of police officers take the job so they can help people to live in safe communities where they can pursue their happiness in whatever peaceful ways they choose. It is one of the highest and noblest of all professions, and one without which peaceful society would not exist. The racial agitators would have everyone believe that we live in a police state where black teens are being gunned down in the streets. The statistics show that out of 12 million arrests per year, over 30,000 per day, 99.9% occur without a suspect being killed, and of that 0.1%, the vast majority are justified police shootings. Hardly the bloodbath myth some would like to portray. I don't know of another profession other than law enforcement where more people feel compelled to tell the trained professionals how to do their jobs. Are we witnessing a time when the most qualified people to do this job will no longer be willing to pin on a badge? Are we witnessing the inception of America as an anti-policing state? From Seattle to Chicago to Atlanta to New York City, more and more cops are quitting. Will it make their communities safer? Do communities care about their safety? Earlier this summer, Travis Yates of the Tulsa Police Force wrote this, quote, "It's the hardest thing I've ever written. I grew up in a law enforcement family. My father worked his way up to the rank of captain at the Fort Smith, Arkansas Police Department. As a kid, I remember going with him on Friday to pick up his check, and I was in awe of these superheroes he worked with. They were funny and fun to be around. Men and women of all races, all with the same mission, to make the community safer. My dad sacrificed a lot, and so did my late mother. Whether it was the week-long surveillance or wire trap or chasing drug runners across the country, he gave it all for my family and worked plenty of extra details to never let our family be without. Some would call that privilege, but where I grew up, it was called hard work. Kids at school thought it was cool what my dad did, and while he sometimes asked me if anyone gave me a hard time, they never did. There was a respect among all, even the kids in shop class. So I became a cop at 21 and never looked back. 27 years passed, and if you would have told me the condition of law enforcement today, I would have never believed you. It's not law enforcement that has changed for the worse since then, but everything around it has. The mentally ill used to get treatment. Now they just send cops. Kids used to be taught respect, and now it's cool to be disrespectful. Supervisors used to back you when you were right, but now they accuse you of being wrong in order to appease crazy people. Parents used to get mad at their kids for getting arrested, and now they get mad at us. The media used to highlight the positive contribution our profession gave to society, and now they ignore it or twist the truth for controversy to line their own pockets. There used to be common respect among criminals. If they got caught, they understood you had a job to do, but now it's our fault when they sit in handcuffs rather than their own personal decisions. If someone attacked a cop, they were seen as such. Now we martyr them, and they sue for millions. We used to be able to testify in court, and we were believed. Now, unless there is video from 3 different angles, no one cares what you have to say. With all this talk about racism and racist cops, I've never seen people treated differently because of their race. And while I know that cowards that have never done this job will call me a racist for saying it, all I've ever seen was criminal behavior and cops trying to stop it, and they didn't give a rip what the skin color was. I've seen cops help and save many types of races, both genders, all kinds of ethnicities you can think of. And while that used to mean something, no one seems to care anymore. I've been called every name you can think of, and many of them with racial overtones, and it's never come from cops. I've watched African American cops take the brunt of this, and even talked one rookie out of quitting after he was berated by a lot of cowards that had the same skin color as he did. I've heard words I never heard before being a cop. Despite that, it's been the greatest opportunity in my life to do this job. I would have recommended it to anyone, and I secretly hoped one of my kids would do it one day. They would have been a 4th-generation cop. But today, all of that is over. I wouldn't wish this job on my enemy. I would never send anyone I cared about into the hell that this profession has become. It's the only job you can do everything right and lose everything. It's the only job where the same citizens you risk your life for hate you for it. It's the only segment left in society where it's cool to discriminate and judge just because of the uniform you wear. I don't know a lot about Carmen Best. I know in a city that is massively majority white and secondarily Asian, she was the African-American head of that police force. I know she and I went to the same graduate school at different times in Boston, and I know from seeing her interviews she was and would have continued to be a tremendous role model, not only for future police, but for young women. She was what she believed, what we call here a force for composition. Her city council and her mayor, it seems, are forces for decomposition. This when the task of every polis, of every political community, is first and foremost to ensure that the forces of composition outweigh the forces of decomposition. If you see anything like the way I see things these days, you have to worry, and worry tremendously, about that balance between the social forces and the asocial forces, and the balance tipping between those two. Some 25 years ago, William Bennett wrote, "Over the past 3 decades, we have experienced substantial social regression. Today, the forces of social decomposition are challenging, and in some instances overtaking those very forces of social composition we never think about. But when decomposition takes hold, it exacts an enormous human cost. Unless these exploding social pathologies are reversed, they will lead to the decline and perhaps even to the fall of the American Republic." G.K. Chesterton put it this way many years ago: "The romance of police activity keeps in some sense before the mind the fact that civilization itself is the most sensational of departures and the most romantic of rebellions. By dealing with the unsleeping sentinels who guard the outposts of society, it tends to remind us that we live in an armed camp, making war with a chaotic world, and that the criminals, the children of chaos, are nothing but the traitors within our gates. The burglars and footpads are happy in the immemorial respectability of apes and wolves. The romance of the police force is thus the whole romance of man. It is based on the fact that morality is the most dark and daring of conspiracies. It reminds us that the whole noiseless and unnoticeable police management by which we are ruled and protected is only a successful knight-errantry." Carmen Best was not a knight-errant searching for chivalrous adventures. Neither are most cops. They are forces of social composition, keeping society protected, unsleeping sentinels who guard the outposts of society. Let us raise one to these guards, and let us wish them the best, as we hope for the best for all of us. They are the ones who will make it so, or leave us so. Civilization, after all, as Professor Ed Delattre once wrote, it depends on something. It depends on people who are committed to civility and decency. Carmen Best was one of those people. We should all attain to be. I'm Seth Leibson. Our lines are open.